1, 2, 3. It's episode 8 of the cruise. Here's Mr. Jim Grant.
Welcome to episode 8 of Cruise. We're recording this on the Tuesday, and hopefully you're watching this on the Thursday. We're trying to go out around 7 p.m. on Facebook and 9 p.m. on YouTube.
Try and keep it consistent.
Now. Coming up on today's show, Greta Thunberg added to the COVID-19 panel. We're looking from the Daily Mail. TV licence numbers plunge even among the COVID times. Number 3, we're looking at citizens could be wrongly charged under new coronavirus laws, and that's from ITV. We're also going to be closing the show with space junk from Chinese rocket narrowly missing New York City. That could have been a big one. So nice. Over to you, Mr. Campbell, episode 8. Thank you for joining us. What's on your mind today?
What the hell? Where are we at, Jim? What's next? It's all just one lily pad leap to the next lily pad leap of madness out there. I'm speaking to friends who are talking about the conversation about COVID deaths and them going down, and perhaps the...
That's okay, I'll just jump in there while we've got the technical problems. I'll read out our first article. This is by Hannah Sparks from the New York Post, and it's from the 13th of May. This is Greta Thunberg added to CNN's expert coronavirus panel. Twitter erupts. An upcoming CNN town hall on the coronavirus pandemic will feature 17-year-old Greta Thunberg alongside a panel of medical experts.
That's Twitter erupting.
Coronavirus facts and fears also include CNN broadcaster Sanjay Gupta, 50, former Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius, 71, and former Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Director Richard Besser, 60. CNN anchor Anderson Cooper, 52, will host alongside Gupta. So there you go. There's a lot of the climate rebellion overlapping with COVID. I mean, they were often on about, we could do without a few less old people, that kind of stuff. Oh, look, the skies are clearer.
Isn't that water clean over there? Isn't it nice to not have any chemtrails in the air?
Obviously bad, but
sure.
But there seem to, how's the phrase, never let a good crop just go to waste.
What's that stench of rotting flesh, though? Oh, that's just the humans. we put them over in the hedges out of the way. It's just like how the realization can't already be there that the depopulation agenda is upon us. It's the thrust of what's happening here. They don't like people. The people who are guiding us do not like people, and whether it's the environmental people who don't like us, or the let's heal COVID as a global medicine. Hey, count Jim in. 1, 2, 3. We're back.
We're back after our inevitable technical difficulties. Our first 2 topics, we're still on them. Craig, Greta Thunberg on the COVID panel. Any thoughts?
I can't gang pile. I want to know what her handler thinks. It's just it's all too ridiculous. But as you'd mentioned, it's all of the same people that hate us and hate having a barbecue and a steak and going on a holiday to Greece and just going for a drive for no reason and
how dare you?
How dare you? How dare you crowd? Yeah, So I guess in many ways we're diametric opposites. So I'm already biased coming into it. But what she might know about COVID, I don't know, but I bet it has something to do with her interest and enjoyment of vaccines. They haven't crossed that bridge yet that I've seen, but I think we're headed for your number one vaccine advocate in the 4 to 26 age range. I don't know. I don't know, Jim.
Now, are you?
Hey.
You're making that prediction now, are you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Absolutely. It's just so...
On Tuesday the 19th of May, Craig Campbell predict that Greta Thunberg will be pushing vaccines.
Well, to be fair to my prediction, who is a face in the pageantry of COVID that isn't a vaccine advocate, right? Like, you know who isn't a vaccine advocate by whether or not they've been banned from Facebook and YouTube, right? You know, that's just, it kind of goes without saying. And that's funny, actually. That's an interesting thing that's going on right now that you probably know about, Jim, that in all sorts of public conversations, attacks are being made on Judy Mikovits, but more so proponents of Judy Mikovits and proponents of Robert Kennedy Jr. There's a confusion going on where I guess the pro-vax lobby, as you would call them, or the visible COVID mainstream, as it were, are deriding people who would be watching Mikovits or Kennedy as anti-vaxxers, when ironically neither of them, as I'm sure you're very aware, neither of them are anti-vax. Like, neither of those two human beings. But there's this whole subterfuge going on.
Certain anti-adjuvants as well, and there was that health conference in December, wasn't there, where their own doctors had problems with the adjuvants. BBC license dropping, people don't want to watch.
That did shock me, Jim. Knocked me for six a little bit there. People
espousing bat soup for a while, and anyone else that questioned it was a lunatic nut job. Didn't matter that they won Nobel Prizes and authored bioweapons treaties for the UN. But
that don't matter.
Maybe people are starting to go, well, you got that kind of a little bit wrong, didn't you? But who knows? Maybe.
Do you think there's that?
The Mail Online says it's all down to Netflix, Disney, and Amazon Prime, which I can see as well easily. So, there's both.
That's the case also. That's actually where I was leaning towards with it. I wasn't for a moment thinking there was any sort of epiphany happening among the public. I think that you're trying to reinforce. And I love that about you, Jim. You know, you're a real philanthropist in that way. I appreciate that when you see your fellow man, approaching on a pavement and making last-minute zigs and zags to step into traffic to avoid your possible, breath plume. And without making eye contact, and you should be wearing a mask. Okay, Mr. Karen, I understand that you're somebody who looks at them and thinks that probably isn't a fair assessment of your average man. But I just can't look at the loss of viewership from the BBC as anybody getting a clue. Because if they had a clue, you and I both know that City Hall would be burned down. So that's not going to happen.
Not that we would ever advocate for such a thing.
No, certainly not.
Not that we would encourage.
I don't even know where City Hall is.
Activity.
I got an alibi.
To go with your analogy, I'm all for trying to keep other people out the way of oncoming traffic. I just wouldn't get in the road to stop them myself. Maybe I'm sort of hook or crook. The old-fashioned is to bring people off stage with, fishing them out of the swimming pool kind of thing. I don't know. Numbers for the BBC have been down pretty much for the last 20 years, and mainstream media's been down.
Yes, they have been steady.
I know that's a lot print-based and internet-based, and the differences there. But I still think more and more people start to not really show much of an interest in the kind of thing. I'll put it this way: if it is all Netflix and all that kind of stuff, and they're prepared to lose the BBC as a part of that, they must be getting their news from elsewhere as well. Do you know what I mean? So
yes, that's another thing to assess with it as well, because the BBC encompasses a lot of viewership, doesn't it? All kinds of viewers for all different reasons, and it's curious now because it doesn't have the sport, so that's already a unique factor of the. We're in the new normal, Jim. Are those the new normal statistics? have they had the new normal put in? Because obviously there's going to be a lot less going on. So maybe that's why people aren't watching. And I can't imagine. I can't ever rationalize why were they watching to begin with.
Speaking of less going on. Our next article, ITV, this is from the 15th of May. Yeah. Every person prosecuted under Coronavirus Act was wrongly charged CPS admits dozens of people have been wrongly charged by police under a new coronavirus law the Crown Prosecution Service has admitted. All 44 charges brought under the Coronavirus Act, which allows officers to remove or detain a suspected infectious person for
every one of them
and assessment since it was brought in on March the 27th, were incorrect. And 12 charges under the Health Protection Regulations 2020, which give powers to break up gatherings and fine people breaching restriction of movement rules, were also wrong. The figures came following a CPS review of all 231 police charges under coronavirus legislation in England and Wales, which includes both the Coronavirus Act and Health Protection Regulations, up to the end of April, where the prosecution has either stopped or ended in a conviction. Service Director of Legal Services Gregor McGill said, under the regulation, the vast majority, that's 175 out of 187, have been charged correctly. He said, have been charged correctly. And he said, and these included people driving from London to Leicester for a party, groups drinking, misbehaving in the park, and other groups hanging around in the town centre after being asked to go home by police on several occasions. Have I just read that correctly? Under regulation, the vast majority, that's 175 out of 187, have been charged correctly. So, hang on.
Yeah, it's very contradictory. That's why I stopped you there.
That's why I
he must be arguing that.
Prosecuted under. So, under regulation, the vast majority they were charged correctly.
But no law existed to do so.
I don't know what to make of that, but here we are on Cruise. We just call it as we see it. We're reading out an article which,
clearly has some glaring issues with its statistics inherent. It seems maybe
it was a split personality, right? In the course.
The guy had a breakdown in the middle.
Morning time, had a bit of lunch, and came back. No, it's all good. So anyway. I don't know what to make. We call it as we see it here on Cruise, and
read it as it's written.
Yeah, read it as it's written. I'm just going to double check that I haven't read it as it's written. It doesn't matter now. Next article. Next. So this is from the National Review. This is the Icelandic study. We have not found a single instance of COVID infecting parents. I'm just trying to get rid of the ad on this thing. Go away. Let me move the papers. Right, well, I might have to just try and read. Stop seeing this ad. I'm not interested in it, so we'll try not to show
have to give up on
again. It. Ad now closed by Google, and yet it still doesn't let me read the actual thing. So ad is closed, but screw you. We're not going to leave. Let's try the close button. It's like a video game trying to get one. There's another one gone. Doesn't matter. Right, so I'm going to try and read this as best I can.
All right.
Someone, the CEO of Icelandic company Decode Genetics in Reykjavik, studied the spread of, make up the thing for yourself, it's a blank here, Iceland with Iceland's Directorate of Health and the National University Hospital. Looks like insisted 36,500 people. As of this writing, Iceland has 1,801 cases. That's 1,801 cases and 10 deaths. Iceland ranks near the very top in testing. Craig, fill in the blanks for me because I can't figure out how to close this ad. It just says ad closed by Google and it's just blank.
Well, I trust the Icelandics. They're a great little study group as well. I spent a bit of time in the country. I quite enjoyed the Icelandic. What's the expression? I was going to try the French one. Like their approach to life. I quite appreciate. A lot of people don't know much about the Icelandics. There's only like 300,000 of them, so we're kind of talking about like a big high school. So in that way, they're also a decent study group, as it were. But my favorite thing about the place, Jim, that was so incredible and unique to it, is of course there's it's like moonscape almost everywhere. So in that way, it's, very austere landscape. But there's a lot of feeling like you're in the middle of fucking nowhere going on. That's the overwhelming feeling that like there's a lot of space. You can see a long way, geysers and all that stuff going on, but moonscapey, so you can see a long way. So there's like almost nothing around. But you go into these little way stations, these little gas stations that you stop in to get your sandwiches and whatnot. And they're just like walls dedicated, whole sections in gas stations that really only have like chips and hot dogs and oil, your main stuff, spark plugs. You're like kind of an austere shop. But then there's just this massive dedication to protein powders and growth shakes, because you don't realize until you think about it, Jim, that like the entire country is dedicated to being convenient for strong men. It's just totally nutty that like even when you're in the middle of fucking nowhere, that you can just get like the most high-end ridiculous protein powders that like somebody who's the size of a horse needs to have 40 of every couple of hours. And it's just like everywhere has that. I've never seen anything like it. Just like the convenience of the necessity of just massive men needing ridiculous amounts of protein doses. Totally twisted place. But as for like their COVID response, what can you say about it? That their numbers are low, they're dealing with it well. Did they lock down, Jim?
I'm not too sure. I would have thought so.
Exactly.
But speaking of locking down or not locking down, we hadn't planned this, but this works quite well for the next article that I've got up. This is the 11th of May. This is the BBC. Coronavirus. French arrivals exempt from UK quarantine plans. Passengers arriving from France will be exempt from forthcoming UK coronavirus quarantine measures. Boris Johnson said on Sunday the rules would be imposed on people coming into the UK to prevent COVID-19 being brought in from overseas. As yet, no start or end date for the measures has been announced. No rush, is there, Mr. Campbell? The government has already indicated that people arriving from the Republic of Ireland will not be made to go into quarantine. However, the measures will apply to UK holidaymakers returning from other destinations.
So if you want to go off to those mucky countries, you want to go go to some of those quarantine places, you got to make that choice. But if French beaches are good enough for you, or Irish beaches, perfect. No waiting on your holiday. So is this going to be the case, I guess, with all the little blocks across Europe? Because that's what they're also noticing, aren't they? The number of countries that now are out of the Schengen agreement or aren't respecting the Schengen rules. And that's partitioning into, I think there's like 27 or so separate borders now with separate COVID arrangements. Like happened most recently with the English not being able to go into Wales on the weekend, right? and Dominic Raab referring to entering Wales from the UK. It's just like, that's the most posh mistake ever to make, huh? What's this place here? Yeah, around here. It's called Wales, sir. It's just totally fucking detached from the countries that he's representative of. I love that about the UK, that Brits just... I notice it, I'm maybe more acutely tied into it, Jim, because I notice English people talking in Scotland in the festival in the summer always, and how they would just talk like they were in London. It's like a known truism that they just like hear, and you realize they're talking to a Canadian in Scotland, and when you're like, do you mean here? And they're like, yeah, here, like, like London kind. It's just like, well, yeah, but we're in Edinburgh, man. Like, yeah, but like they don't make any more differentiation than I'm always in London. If I haven't got on a plane, then as things refer to me, I'm like either a Southerner or a Londoner. It's a very, very odd idiosyncrasy. It's even weirder when you see it done, and it's English people forgetting that they're in a different country like Scotland, and and that what they're talking about isn't applying particularly, like what time they have to quit drinking or if they ever have to. When it becomes it became acute when Scotland lowered their drink alcohol to 0.5, right? You remember when that happened? And like English people just act like they're in England all the time, and like 0.5 of a drink is like barely sniffing a beer. It's just like you're drunk or you're over the limit if you've had even one. So they just, in the first months of rolling out 0.5 as the limit in Scotland, they just hauled in a myriad of English people who just happened, probably because they were drunk, were just driving in southern Scotland. Like, of course I'm pissed. Like, but how many was I allowed to have? Only one? What do you fuck? Like, that's why I find it funny that they're right now trying to figure out whether or not Boris Johnson is a closet boozehound, right? Like everybody's, I heard he didn't have COVID. He was just drying out, and I heard he's not at Checkers. He's at some, dry out. What do they call them? The
rehab clinics,
like a rehab clinic. There's all over going on, but it's like
speculation, unfounded. Craig's just going through ideas here.
Yeah, whatever happened to like every British person you ever knew, whether they were Scots, English, or Irish, that they were just constantly fucking hammered. That's just like that's almost every for me. That's pretty close to a truism. I don't want to like over egg the cliche. But the fact is that like drinking is just kind of something that's going on anyway, and then to suggest that that he's like Churchill, he's drinking through a crisis, or that that he's got a drink problem and he's facing Churchill faced World War I and World War II. You fucking nitwit! Like holy shit, this is Boris Johnson who's like what privations has he had? He's like able to just keep drinking and not being very competent while he's like killing old people, as it's happened here, right? It's not like he's in any sort of trenches or even on a boat. It's just unbelievable that they're trying to get him for maybe drinking. It's like I didn't have any opinion on it. I can honestly say, Jim, like if he is a drunk and he's been able to hide it, in no way does that enter how I would besmirch his character. Honestly, like it just wouldn't even enter the equation. I think he's a dick for a myriad of things that are not that, and it just seems so funny that they're trying to make a big deal of it. I can't imagine what it would be if he actually has one. Like what kind of drinking problem, what astronomically crazy drinking problem might he have? Can you conjecture?
I wouldn't have a clue.
Have you ever had this phenomenon, Jim? Because I've also had this in the same category where like somebody who you knew went to a rehab clinic and you didn't even know they were a drunk. Right? Like, didn't know that they had what they thought was a drinking problem, for example. Like, I've had that happen. It's just that then I was trolling a bit today, and I did find some footage of Johnson, like, really in the fucking bag. We got to play that, Jim. Actually, he's talking to a bunch of Northern Ireland business people, and it looked like they got him like late into the morning, and he was trying to explain Brexit. It was wonderful. We've definitely got to put it on, but he just like the movements were too big, he just that. Overly
like the Canadians, the Brits are known for their drinking as well. So
totally.
What constitutes an alcohol problem in some countries might just be a weekend out. For
totally, that's what I mean. In fact,
female.
Thank you for pointing that out, because again, I know that we could both over cliche this, but it's nice to give people the perspective that it is absolutely the case that like you don't really ask people if they drink, because of course they fucking do. Like you wouldn't be hanging out with them if they didn't drink. Like that's kind of a rite of passage of many friendships and friendship circles. We always say that there's groups of friends who drink on their way to drinking, right? They're like, what are we drinking before we go drinking is a pretty common commonality in Canada, and it usually involves like beer to whiskey is generally or rye, but it's usually like something that you're drinking quite a lot of, like the Brits, just a lot of something, and then you start drinking a lot of something else later, and then you wake up in a head, or you just like you live a drinking person's life. For us, it's always rye. All of the great myths of drinking involve people who drink rye, which, if you're not aware, are historical drinking reputation. And the people who are known to drink rye whiskey, it's just like there's a lot of punching. Just a lot of just real punchy kind of people, right? Like it's just it's one of those high sugar content spirits that, like, as they always say, you should have passed out, but instead, you're going downtown to see what they're doing. I can honestly say, Jim, I don't want to digress too much in the show, but it's wonderful for me to be able to impart to you. Like, I'm from Alberta, right? Which is like, Alberta is the most English bit of Canada. It's got England on its flag, on its provincial flag. It's named after a princess. It's like it's they call it Texas of the North, and of all of the provinces in Canada, it's the only one that a couple of years ago, for the first time, we have extremely strict alcohol laws. Just because of what I'm telling you. Like, they really keep... The French bits of Canada, they're looser with it. They're much like the French on the continent here. You can get it at grocery stores, wine and beer and whatnot. But they don't let English people do that. They don't let the English bits of Canada get their booze just willy-nilly all over the place. They keep, like, it starts in a pillbox surrounded by, Northwest Mounted Police, basically British redcoats, trying to keep everybody away from it. And then slowly they've, like, let it out so that, like, more... loose establishments can deal in it, but the majority of it, much like Scandinavia, is dealt with through the government. So it's always a strange thing to tell people that they're so tight on alcohol at home that if you're within reach of it in a vehicle, you're charged, Jim. If you go to the grocery store or to the liquor store and you get alcohol, it has to be in the boot or in the back of the truck. It cannot be like just on the back seat anywhere in Canada. And where I'm from, Alberta, who's extremely strict for their alcohol, where and again, this is now just a few years ago going back, they decided kind of out of the blue, and it was like a little moment of liberty victory for me. I remember like reading about this story and thinking, this is amazing. They legalized it. They thought that, as I hope it sounds to your ears, that it sounded absolutely immature that you could be charged criminally for not doing something, for like the potential that you could do something. It's insane that you're like, oh, you could have reached into the back and had a beer. It's like, yeah, but I fucking didn't. Like, come on, you guys quit being assholes tonight, right? So it's a pretty weird thing. So they rescinded that in Alberta, Jim. I remember having like a point of a tiny bit of pride of where I'm from and thinking, yeah, somebody in Canada like stood up. One promise just said, you don't need to put it in the back of the boot or, in the back of the truck. Jim, I don't know if it lasted like 20 minutes or an hour, but they just like, it didn't go long before they were like, okay, that's it. They can't fucking even reach the booze anymore. Because when I think of like alcohol in my early life, I just remember like crazy drama. If I can put you in the mindset of like, it's like really, honestly, like cowboys and Indians, like real fucking cowboys and real fucking Indians wandering around and a lot of drinking going on. And when you would see like alcohol influenced events, which for us normally translated as car accidents, Jim, I honestly haven't seen anything even close since. I just remember as like a child to teenager to like young adult, just seeing like a fucking truck that's been in the air for like 70, 80 feet, right? Like just like a truck that's coming down before it hits the fucking lamppost. Like people just high as fuck on like bottles of whiskey or you name it, whatever it is, and then just driving like fucking insane imbeciles, like literally carnage, Jim. I just remember like mad, not just a little accidents here and there, but just like I remember being woken up once because because the light out of the light standard that had been hit the pavement outside of the house. Right? That's what it was like, the wake up call. And it was a really strange, like a ka-chang, like imagine that much glass just blasting, making a wild noise and then shattering, and then just, coming out, and there's a fucking car wrapped around the post. And, the guy was completely okay, because, as you know, I'm sure everybody knows, because he was fucking hammered. And
I thought you were going to say because he's Canadian and therefore hard as nails.
No, just because he was just fucking hammered. So everybody who's hammered in a car accident just fucking wanders out and looks around, wonders who. You see, who's that perfect one? The Brits had it with that, the most hilarious one, Anton Deck. Which one was he? The Deck? Was it Deck that had the car accident when he was hammered? Oh, we got to put it on, Jim. It's unbelievable. But it's the perfect example of what I'm talking about, where they don't even know if they've been in a car accident. Right? They're just like walking around talking like we're talking to each other now. Hey, where are you guys from? Just like, is that your car? I feel rude. Just fucking happen to be holding the key. So I hate to, make too much fun of that, but that's like the experience that I had growing up with alcohol, was just that it was everywhere and all over the place, and being drunk in like just stupid quantity. It is one of the funny affinities that Brits and Canadians have when we meet abroad. It's a really wonderful bond very often. So again, it brings me back, Jim, why the fuck do they care whether or not Boris Johnson likes a pint? It's totally fucking neither here nor there. It's like everybody does, almost. It's part of the brainwashing.
You just pointed out, it's that stuff like that can be used to control what I call emotional one-dimensional thinkers. So here's how that little work. They introduce that and they say,
wow,
hey, you're against drink driving, aren't you? You don't want to put children's lives at risk and all that kind of stuff. And you go, yeah, I hate drink drivers. I think it's bad. I can't advocate that in any form. Okay, you need to sign this law that takes it like to the extreme where you can't have it on the seat or anything like that. And then if you go, well, hold on, that's not drink driving, they go, you're against drink driving laws. And that's what I call the emotionally manipulated one-dimensional thinkers.
Wow, yeah.
Drink drive,
I get it.
not drink drive. And you don't often think that, okay, drink drive law, and you need to go more into it on a second level to say I'm against drink driving, but let's look at it whether this actually affects drink driving. And if we're talking about saving lives here, if we continue to make these fines too high, we continue to make people feel harassed when they want to relax just to buy alcohol on their way home. They're not going to touch it even remotely in their vehicle. I don't advocate that at all. They're just taking it back home there.
It is tempting, though. It is tempting.
Then you can divide and conquer, because people go, if you're against that law, you must be against drink driving. And that's how you are able to get the one-dimensional thinkers are very easily emotionally manipulated to be able to come together and force through laws which actually do far more harm than good, because of course if people feel harassed and they're business owners, they're going to move their businesses away, you're going to get unemployment, all these sort of things. It's so easy to always just blast this bad when you can talk about this about the lockdown.
Yes, I was hoping you were going to dovetail into that, Jim. Just exactly that. It's a perfect analogy for now.
One-dimensional thinking. Well, something that could get us out of lockdown. Moving on to our next article. This is from Sunday, the 17th of May, so a couple of days ago. This is being recorded on Tuesday, the 19th of May. Mm-hmm. This is from The Guardian. Llamas are the real unicorns. Why they could be our secret weapon against coronavirus. Researchers hope llama antibodies could help protect humans who have not been infected. The solution to the coronavirus may have been staring us in the face this whole time. Especially if you're a Monty Python fan, they love llamas.
Or if you're like on a
lazily
stool,
chewing on a carrot. All we need, it seems, is llamas. A study published last week in the journal Cell.
Did you write this, Jim?
Sorry?
You wrote this, didn't you? This is where I gotta try and figure out which one's the fake news story.
No, this is a real one. The antibodies in llamas' blood could offer a defense against the coronavirus. In addition to larger antibodies like ours, llamas have small ones that can sneak into spaces or viral proteins that are too tiny for human antibodies, helping them to fend off the threat. The hope is that the llama antibodies could help protect humans who have not been infected. Antibodies had already proven themselves able to fight SARS and MERS leading researchers to speculate that they could work against the virus behind COVID-19. So there you go, Wonder Llamas. It's like something out of a Monty Python sketch.
Yeah, I don't hate llamas anymore now, I guess. I really was neither here nor there. I don't know if I'd be 50-50 in picking them from an alpaca, but I'm pretty sure that I could fail that test. I don't know if I get through the llama alpaca threshold. I'm remembering one that I saw. I went to a petting zoo not long ago, and he had whichever he was, a llama or an alpaca. He was black, and you've probably seen them at close range, Jim. They're very their haircuts are very humorous, to say the least. And they have very a lot of character to them, and of course that wonderful lack of knowledge of their own character makes it that much richer. But this one had particularly buck teeth, which I wonder we could put it up. In fact, I can show it in the program. It's just he looked like his teeth were always out, but he had like jet black hair, so it really like made the teeth more prominent. But it was like the teeth were giving him the finger, and it was really a real dude. But I don't know if he was a llama or an alpaca. I'm not sure.
Who would know? So our next one is, speaking of who,
alpaca
the
expert,
Burundi orders WHO officials to leave the country. This is from the BBC, and this is from the 14th of May 2020. That seems to be a podcast that I've just clicked on. Africa Today or something.
You opened something up there?
There you go. Burundi has ordered 4 key staff members of the World Health Organization to leave the country.
Oh, boy.
So if you want to know more, listen to the BBC podcast. We've already ascertained they could do with the viewership. Speaking of ours, please, if you're on Facebook, please like our cruise Facebook page. So you'll see the video, see the word cruise on it, click it, and like the page on Facebook. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. We're looking to go out every Thursday now. Thursday around sort of 6 or 7 on Facebook, around 9 p.m. on YouTube. We're going to be looking to record mainly on Tuesdays.
But we might do an extra one, right, on the Wednesdays.
Yeah,
which would be nice.
We may go out more than once a week. We'll always try and put something out on the Thursday, right?
If things get even wackier than they are now.
Yeah. So this is
why were they kicked out of Burundi?
Sorry, say that again.
Why was the WHO kicked out of Burundi?
It was a podcast link rather than a news article from the BBC, so I couldn't open it
interesting.
without listening to it. So the Mirror, I just thought I'd throw it out there, really, because there wasn't a lot about it. So I thought I'll just dig that out there and throw that out there. Again, all the sources for what we say, or what I say anyway, will be archived in the description.
Did he say cowboys and Indians? Yes.
Yeah, desperately searching away for archive material of Boris Johnson being a drunk, and they'll probably find that other bloke from Russia, won't they? Boris Johnson, wasn't it?
Yes, I saw him parallel, and he liked to drink too, didn't he?
Same sort of haircut.
And loved to drink also, right? He was like a real boozehound. So, and not to cast any aspersions on Boris. I don't know what he does one way or the other, but just that just gets me, Jim. I just love that.
Didn't particularly do a good job of running the country in Russia, as far as I remember. So maybe a cursed name. So this is from the Mirror. This is from. Oh, it's not letting me see the name to begin with. So this is from the Mirror, and this is government will have to raise taxes and freeze wages to cover 300 billion coronavirus bill. Officials have leaked dire options, including hiking income tax, ending the pension triple lock, and freezing public sector pay for 2 years in a leaked document. But Cabinet Minister insisted a world of austerity wouldn't return. I've remembered that they didn't give themselves a public freeze, did they? MPs gave themselves pay rises, and wasn't it a nice little bonus on top as well? Check out our previous episodes, or just Google MPs pay rises 2020. Be sure to put in 2020, otherwise you'll get them for every single year, and you'll start to see your dinner coming back
At
up.
the end at the end of a number like 300 billion, you just expect them to say, "But don't worry, the world will be engulfed in a massive conflagration, more catastrophic than anything we've ever seen, long before we pay that off." So don't in any way, don't fret. I was speaking to Home today, and they made mention of the belief that Canada itself would not be able to pay off its debts for, whatever, 3 lifetimes. And I just thought, Jim, like I just thought now, these things are getting paid off. There's no payoff coming. There's like somebody is going to come along and shake the monopoly board long before that, whether it's the weather or whether it's, and I say that with no investment of fear of the weather other than that which a meteorite or an asteroid might create because of its, blasting us off our pole alignment or something that catastrophic. But I don't see like the world's turning this thing around and starting to like put a few bucks away here and there and finally paying off that 300 billion pound debt. Is that what they think COVID alone has cost? And this is before we get into, and this is behind the scenes, so they've leaked it. But this is before they take any responsibility.
I'll read it out. Pensioners and public sector workers could be clobbered as the government tries to repair the economy in the wake of coronavirus, according to elite Treasury plans. A document seen by the Daily Telegraph estimates the budget deficit could hit 337 billion this year because of the pandemic. That is compared to the forecast 55 billion in March's budget. The assessment drawn up for the Chancellor Rishi Sunak and dated May the 5th warned that to plug such a gaping hole in the public coffers through tax revenue rises would be very challenging without breaking the tax lock. An election promise not to raise taxes. Measures including income tax hikes, a 2-year public sector pay freeze, and the end of the triple lock on pensions may be required to fund the debt. The triple lock means pensions rise by at least 2.5%. The inflation rate or average earnings growth, whichever is largest. So again, this will continue as the lockdown continues. And I have no doubt the lockdown is doing some good flattening that curve, but it could also be flattening the spending power of pensioners' money to come in relation to inflation when that effectively devalues their currency if it isn't being kept up in the line of inflation. You see where I'm going with that?
Yes.
So they get the same amount, but it buys less in stores and Tesco's and other such, as does other such supermarkets and stuff. So, and we've already got pensioners choosing between heating and eating long before the coronavirus. So the lockdown does good. I'm just saying that people should be aware that it can do some harm longer down, the road, and you're just kicking that can down the road in terms of death, because people can die from starvation, die from unemployment, die from homelessness, and the health, risks associated with all those sorts of things. So, pros and cons. Again, don't be a one-dimensional thinker to say, criticising the lockdown means you want it to end. I'm just saying we're here at Cruise to weigh up both sides of the argument, calling it as we see it, even with our own article earlier, which kind of weighed itself up and argued with itself. We're here to debate. Free speech is good. We're just a couple of comedians just asking questions. So what do you think about that, Craig?
Well, I thought that you were going to end that article by saying we've murdered all the pensioners. We forgot to mention all the people that we were thinking that would be paying into this actually don't exist anymore because we seeded all of our elderly homes with known COVID cases, and they're the majority of our deceased at the minute. It's just, on one hand, they're wholesale murdering, and we haven't even got to the I'm sure you may even have an article on it, the now mystery 2/3 of those who have died over this COVID lockdown period are from deaths not attributable to COVID. So there's a massive death spike that's like maybe 200, 300 Harold Shipmans have been racing around the country doing yeoman's work in putting people out of their misery, because the numbers are not only high, but they're also mysterious. So So we haven't even got to the point of liabilities, which is when you were talking about the 300 billion. I was just thinking the whole time it was rolling in my head, Jim. I just thought, yeah, but what about the lawsuits? What about? But then I realized that will probably never happen here. That's not something that the government is ever held criminally responsible for. Is that safe to say?
We're in uncharted territory,
yes,
but I
exactly.
do know, there's that old saying, the level of tyranny that you put up with is exactly equal to that which you'll receive. And so what I'm saying about that is, obviously it's not the Chinese people's fault, but you do need to look into that. Did it come out of a lab? You need to stop going, anyone that thinks it came out of a lab is a conspiracy theory. You need to start asking serious questions. You need to start having independent investigations, and then you go down that road. But
have you seen as well?
Fingers in your ears and go, I know everything, la 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 la, isn't an investigation or science in that.
Have you seen the investigation just launched as well by the Aussies, and I believe maybe Norway is involved in it also, and who else is? There's another sneaky little country in there. Who the hell is it? Have you seen it? It's being it's also involves members of the WHO, so it's already been pyloried, but it's quite a large international body that's looking for answers into the COVID disaster, as it were, globally. I just can't see it being anything other than a cover-up, though, by the same players who are complicit in our problems at the minute.
Well, talking about science and investigating the COVID and things, bringing up onto our last episode 7, where I talked about black people and different other sort of racial groups having different death rates and all things like that. We had feedback, so shout out to Martina, who wrote another great podcast.
Shut up, you asshole.
Societal taboo subjects to the fore. I listened to it in bed and fell asleep, so it is impregnated in my subconscious, which might explain the weird dream. So we've impregnated Martina's subconscious, Craig.
Amazing.
And she went on to say that she really enjoyed the part about the genes and things like that. I would like to point out that I came up with different ideas on things like that. I actually did some more research into it. It turns out it's anyone's guess, really. So I found 4 little articles that I'll just read out briefly to more or less.
Can I interrupt?
Contradict each other.
I was going to say as well during that episode, Jim, that there was data out of the States that I hope you're reading that was also parallel to that. So maybe that's what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I just like to be able to look at all things from different angles.
Yeah, sure.
And so often in this world, someone goes, I like cats. And then someone will send an email to go, why did you say you hate dogs? And all that kind of stuff. So I like to be able to go, hey, there's this bit of information which points us this way, and then this contradicts it. Because that's really, an investigation is a microcosm of life. It rarely has one answer. It has lots of little different answers under subcategories which form a foundation for a more bigger implication. That's what I usually find for investigations and other such things. So this is a few things I've dug out about this to go through. So this is February 2008. Immune system differences found. This is by the BBC.
Whoa.
Researchers have found population differences in the behaviour of immune system genes, potentially affecting how people respond to infection. The Chicago University team looked at over 9,000 genes in 180 people, half Caucasian and half from Nigeria. They found differences between the two races in 5% of key genes. The American Journal of Gene Genetics study may help explain why some groups are more vulnerable to disease and aid development of more tailored treatment. The researchers used gene chip array technology, which uses a microscope to analyse a specialised slide capable of containing thousands of genes. Blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
They found significant differences, particularly in immune system genes involved in producing antibodies to combat bacterial infection. This backs up previous work, which has shown African Americans may be more susceptible than Caucasians to infection, such as gum disease, bug, Porphyromonas, gingivitis. You can read the article for yourself. It's all on our comments and description section. The US study also found activity levels varied significantly in genes involved in basic cellular processes, which are thought to play a part in how the body responds to drugs, including the risks of side effects. So there you go. drugs may have different effects on different ethnic groups as well as infections and things. So that's something I learnt there.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all, Jim. I was reading today about gene therapy and its implementation in the most currently believed, although only held up again in the Gates Fauci Trump structure, vaccine for COVID, and it's a gene rewriting vaccine. Interestingly. So I guess that's, sort of it was in the articles that I was reading surrounding it as well. It's not surprising to hear what you're saying now, because it seems to be, at least whether I agree with it ethically or morally or not, it looks like a large portion of the future of medicine is in gene editing and gene therapy, exactly what that is. But it also, the big ethical ramification is like, what the fuck else does it do, right? Like, that's why we're into oblivion and staring down the barrel of a gun to not be doing at least wide animal studies, if not animal studies at all, which we're pointedly not doing right now as we look at gene editing to rewrite people's DNA with a I believe it's an mRNA vaccine, it's called. So that's what it does. It goes in, like, it teaches the body's genes to be better at fighting the disease. But what they don't know is the other things it's doing once it's in there, and there's no coming back, Jim. So you're like, your genes are edited now. You don't get the anti-edit pill when you're not feeling better. So we're in crazy times.
Talking about some historical editing here, this is by sciencemag.org. This is by Elizabeth Pennisi.
Yeah.
Black Death left a mark on human genome.
Yeah.
The Black Death didn't just wipe out millions of Europeans during the 14th century. It left a mark on the human genome, favouring those who carried certain immune system genes, according to a new study. Those changes may help explain why Europeans respond differently from other people to some diseases and have different susceptibilities to autoimmune disorders.
Yes.
Geneticists know that human populations evolve in the face of disease.
Yeah.
Certain versions of our genes help us fight infections better than others. And so an immunologist at Radboud University Nijmegen Medical Centre in the Netherlands, he realised that in his home country, Romania, the existence of two very different ethnic groups provided an opportunity to see the hand of natural selection in the human genome 1,000 years ago.
Wow.
The Roma people, commonly known as gypsies, migrated into Europe from North India, but they intermarried little with European Romanians and thus have very distinct genetic backgrounds. Yet, by living in the same place, both of those groups experienced the same conditions, including the Black Plague, which did not reach northern India. So the researchers sought genes favoured by natural selection by seeking similarities in the Roma and European Romanians that are not found. Anyway, it's a long study.
Isn't that neat? Oh, I love that stuff. No, I can utterly see how it would be important to study those different human groups that have experienced different stimulus over the years. And I'm also aware, you may have heard exactly in the same conversation, that's why I was surprised it was new information, that there are, particularly in Norway and in Sweden, a higher percentage than normal people who are immune to HIV/AIDS. And they realized that similarly during the AIDS epidemic when high-risk individuals weren't coming down with it. And then they realized that that was a latent effect of the cull that had happened in the Black Death. So suddenly, how many generations ago your family survived the Black Death, and that meant that in the 80s in Stockholm, you couldn't get AIDS. Not just didn't get AIDS, Jim. You couldn't get it. For love nor money, you were not getting AIDS. And it's just like...
It's weird, because we haven't planned this, but my next article is from nature.com.
Oh, okay.
Did Black Death boost HIV immunity in Europe? Experts argue over whether smallpox or plague should take the credit. This is by Michael Hopkins.
Okay.
And this is March 2005. So, devastating epidemics that swept Europe during the Middle Ages seem to have had an unexpected benefit, leaving 10% of today's Europeans resistant to HIV infection. Which epidemics of which disease. Researchers claimed this week that plague helped boost our immunity to HIV, but rival teams are arguing that the credit should go to smallpox. Again,
imagine when those two get at it.
Black Death in the lead, Black Death in the lead, coming to the final finishing line. Oh, and he's overtaken by the smallpox. So, there you go. We don't have the other. All we're here on cruise is to point out to you that there are different schools of thought. And
we're willing to drink with both of them. Whatever. And we're willing to drink with both of them. There's two schools of thought, and we're more than happy to pour down with either of them or all three together.
Yeah, we just like asking questions.
Damn right.
Here's a good one here. Going back further than the Black Death, this is as far back as I could find. This is from
less reliable.
Phys.org. Europeans and Africans have different immune systems, and Neanderthals are partly to thank. It's long been clear that people from different parts of the world differ in their susceptibility to developing infections, as well as chronic inflammatory and autoimmune diseases. Now, two studies reported in Cell on October 20th show that those differences in disease susceptibility can be traced in large part to differences at the genetic level, directing the way the immune systems of people with European and African ancestry are put together. The researchers also found that differences between populations have been selected for over time because they conferred advantages to people facing distinct health challenges in the places where they lived. As a result, according to the new evidence, people of African ancestry generally show stronger immune responses than Europeans do. So that flies in the face of our podcast on episode 7. But that's what we're here to do. Here, like to point
contradict each other every couple of weeks.
Yeah, and we ask questions and always asking questions of ourselves.
It's funny it's funny with the contribution of Neanderthal, for me anyway. I always enjoy that they know that, like, I don't know if it's written there, but I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to find that nearly 100% of the crossover with humans and Neanderthal comes from the female, I believe, mitochondrial DNA, because we banged their women, but they didn't bang us. It's basically we didn't mind Neanderthal bride around the village as long as you can handle a good solid walk. Take a rock in the face, honey. Are you good at taking a rock in the face? Perfect. You're going to be great around here. And that was pretty much the case, that very rarely did the Neanderthal DNA enter the human DNA through the male, if at all. Well, I'm sure there were cases.
So speaking about questioning ourselves, I mentioned before that it was Copernicus put under house arrest. You'll believe it was Copernicus. I could feel it as my mouth was saying it. I thought, am I historically accurate on that? And I think it was Galileo that was put under house arrest for going public with Copernicus's ideas. So
didn't he go blind in custody, if I'm remembering?
Galileo was not questioned about, merely warned not to espouse heliocentrism. Also in 1616, the church banned Nicholas Copernicus's book, which was published in 1543. So there you go. I got the idea right, but I got it slightly wrong. It was Galileo put under house arrest, and I do believe that the Vatican later apologised for it. I do believe this is for
they apologised for that.
It did take a little bit of time, to be fair.
Did they mention anything about Nazis and cocaine?
Yeah,
they were apologizing.
Well,
we're here. Sorry.
Yeah, when I said in the 17th century, but
sure.
They did get round to apologising on the 7th of November 1992. So Vatican admits Galileo was right.
And they left the coke and the Nazis completely out of it.
The Inquisition of the Roman Catholic Church forced Galileo. I can't say name.
Galilei? I think it's easier if you sing it. Galilei.
Modern science to recant his theory that the Earth moves around the sun. Under threat of torture, Galileo, seen facing his inquisitors, recanted. But as he left the courtroom, he is said to have muttered, "All the same, it moves." Last week, 359 years later, that must be the same people in charge of locking down Britain's airports during coronavirus.
Finally, 349 years later.
Response time. Last week, 359 years later, the church finally agreed.
Perfect. Well done, the church. Jesus Christ. I've now mentioned it a couple of times. Did he not go blind in prison as well, unfortunately? Poor guy. Poor Copernicus. I thought that was part of his part of the ailment that being left in the dark. Maybe he had a disease or something, but I seem to recall he was going blind for some reason. It wasn't fun. It wasn't fun house arrest. Poor guy.
No. Our lockdown seems pale by significantly in comparison next to it. So
the spirit of Copernicus.
I think we'll just finish up here tonight with just a couple of articles. Our first one here, this is by The Mirror, and this is, as soon as it loads down, murder hornets can chew through human skin.
I forgot.
And kill... it's loaded. And kill with one sting. The terrifying insects are typically found in Japan, and they've been known to attack humans by chewing through the skin and stinging. The 12th of May 2020 this is. Deadly murder hornets can chew through human skin. The terrifying insects are typically found in Japan and have been known to attack humans. Speaking to WUSA, entomologist Dr. Samuel Ramsey explained, "We've been sounding the alarm about this insect for months. The Asian giant hornet is a very large insect, about the size of your thumb. It has these very sharp, large mandibles that are... I've seen videos of other insects ganging up and killing these things, which... Is that the
one...
Bees, you know?
Is that where the Asian bee... Is that the Japanese bee that surrounds it and heats it up so it dies? Is it that one?
Yeah.
Is that it?
I saw that.
Is that it? Okay, I didn't know that I didn't know the murder hornet was involved in that.
Yeah.
Right.
Bees have a beef with them, and some other species, and they gang up on them massively. And they
heat it up, right? Like they vibrate until it reaches a certain temperature that's like just on the threshold of death for the bee, but is fatal for the wasp. To my understanding, and so they basically cook it with their like vibrating.
I got footage of it on there's a Facebook page I run called Beyond the News. So go to Beyond the News, like that page, and there's a video of these bees all going up and taking down one of the murder hornets. It's like pretty cool stuff.
Totally.
You know, bees are great for us, all the pollination stuff like that. Hornets, definitely root for bees. Bees win. It's a good fight.
Yes.
So,
I love a bee.
You were talking earlier about pensions not being paid because some asteroid destroys the Earth.
Yes.
You know, those things happen.
Type of thing. Happens. Every few millennia.
Hardly ever, don't they? But although Dr. Graham Hancock and everything like that, his works are great. Stuff like that. And someone else who does that. I'm a big fan of his work. But anyway, it doesn't have to be an asteroid. Not with people like this in the world. This is by Tamar Lab this is New York Post. This is rounding off our show here this evening recorded on the 19th of May, the Tuesday, and this article is from the 12th, a week ago. Space junk from Chinese rocket was about 15 minutes from hitting New York City. Chunks of the massive Chinese rocket that recently took an uncontrolled plunge back into the Earth's atmosphere narrowly missed hitting New York City, according to a report. I mean, imagine.
I'm imagining.
Or anything.
That's
that could
exactly.
have had the coronavirus on it. As that thing, there's going to be people in this world that see this space junk hurtling towards their head, knowing that it will, death for the entire city. And some of them will be like, has that been cleansed? Where's my hand sanitizer? People are so afraid of it.
At least it wasn't corona.
So chunks of the massive Chinese rocket that recently took an uncontrolled plunge back into the Earth's atmosphere narrowly missed hitting New York City, according to the report.
Where did it fall into the sea?
Had the Long March 5B rocket re-entered the atmosphere about 15 to 20 minutes earlier on Monday, it would have rained debris on the nation's largest metro area, according to Ars Technica, a technology-focused publication.
Wow.
The about 100-foot-long rocket was launched on May the 5th, carrying an unnamed prototype of a newly designed
We can't tell you that bit.
crew capsule. So there you go.
Wow.
Wasn't already pissed off at the Chinese with all the COVID having the high death rate.
What the fuck?
Chinese,
What the fuck is going on?
15 to 20 minutes from who knows how many people this would have taken out. I have no idea. But a 100-foot-long rocket?
Yeah, quite a few. I'd go with quite a few. I came indoors from outside the other day. This is another thing horribly, Jim, about growing up on the prairies. It was a bit gusty, so I was in the backyard, killing a fucking soda water. And the gusts started to come up to the point of I was starting to worry about building materials flying around, right? Happens. And then I remember, no, it doesn't happen. It only happens because I grew up on the fucking prairies. And when the wind would come up, people get their heads cut off with pieces of plywood, right? Because it's just like you see tumbleweeds or anything else, the wind is pretty fucking severe. And it would just constantly pick up really big shit and smack people with it. And I in England here, I picked up my shit and went in the house because I thought, I don't want to get hit by a fucking piece of plywood today. And it was just my fucking horrible anxiety-ridden youth that had me think that I'm still being chased by the weather, even though I'm living in a different country now. It's fucking unreal.
So, thank you very much for clicking play, whatever time you decided to watch today. This has been Cruise Podcast Episode 8. Remember, we're going to be trying to go out now every Thursday around 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Facebook and 9 p.m. on YouTube, and those are UK times. You can catch up on our podcast on Anchor. I think we're now on Spotify.
We got to have some sort of contest if they find us on BitChute. They get a free something or other if they're able to find us on BitChute. Good luck.
Can anyone find us on BitChute?
That's your mission.
We've had about 30 odd views. And
Who are these people?
Jim
can't even watch it.
But we're going to move to other platforms as well as continuing on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to shotgun blast this to go out on as many different platforms as possible. Mm-hmm. Whatever platform you're viewing on or listening to, please hit any form of like or subscribe so you can be notified on our future podcasts. As ever, if you've got an article for us, if you're on Facebook, just tag Cruise, our Facebook page, into the article. A big shout out to Martina for leaving those kind words. So, interact with us on our Facebook page. Please leave your comments on there. We'll read them out on the podcast for you. So, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Closing comments, Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, my Facebook ban ends tomorrow, so I'll be getting back to your comments. So
a new one begins in 2 days' time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there'll be a tight window though. Get your comments in quick. I spend a lot of time in the clink. Good to see you tonight, Jim, and look forward to speaking soon.
Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been Cruise Episode 8. Cheers.